All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome. Thank you to each and every one of you who took your Monday evening out to learn about how we can increase that microbiome diversity in our health, right, in our gut health. And so I'm just going to share my screen and so we can dive right into this talk. There we go. All right, so we're on day 10, and I hope everyone is feeling good. I know it's been a challenging, rough couple of days since we first got started, but I want you to know that we're in it for the long haul. When we're looking to cleanse and reset our gut microbiome, we're trying to do a lot of different things. We're trying to improve our physical health. We're trying to improve our mental health and try to create these overall lifestyle changes that are going to lead towards a better, healthy life. And so, just a question, how is everything going so far? I know for myself, it's been quite a challenging experience, especially because the last time I did a cleanse, I was completely fine. I experienced no bloating, no uncomfortable, feelings. I didn't have any of that. And it wasn't actually until just the end of last year where I started to notice that my body was changing. And that was because of me being on antibiotics, 2 courses of antibiotics after my wisdom teeth were removed. And I had to go on Tylenol and Advil, and that also exacerbated the whole issue where I started to notice a lot more bloating. I started to notice more cramping. Certain cravings for food started to appear that I didn't have before. And so I needed to do this cleanse to help reset my gut bacteria and reset my gut microbiome. And I noticed that initially when I went on this cleanse, when I started my first couple of days, I got very bloated, right? And I know a lot of you had experienced that same thing, while some of you didn't experience that at all. The first couple of days were easy, and then you started to notice that bloating later on. But I can definitely say that it's been about 10 days and it's starting to subside. It's getting a lot better. But the last time I did this cleanse, it wasn't as challenging. So it really just goes to show what, antibiotics and, different environmental factors can come into play that affect your microbiome. And it's actually incredible that your microbiome can start to change in 3 to 4 days just from changing your diet, right? Just from adding things that you didn't have in your diet before, like the fibers from Live Fiber and the Pairway Plus. And so just understand that your microbiome is a living thing. It's always changing. And, depending on what we do, it's gonna change. But we have to also think that achieving a healthy microbiome is different for everybody, and being able to, and that time span associated with that is different, right? It's not just what we're going to do in the first 30 days of this cleanse. It's what we do long term that counts. That's what matters more. It's that consistency that's going to lead towards a healthy microbiome. And so initially, when we started this cleanse, we can think of our bodies like this piece of grass, right? Our intestinal system as this piece of grass that was, on the left, where had a lot of leaves, a lot of weeds, a lot of bad bacteria, things that are not healthy for that grass to grow. And so we had little to no fiber. We may have not been nutritionally consistent with our diet. We may have been, like myself, exposed to antibiotics. You may have had some intestinal damage. There may have been a lot of different factors that could put you in that position. And now we're like kind of in a transitionary period where we started to add those prebiotic fibers, those healthy prebiotic fibers from the live fiber, which offers a good variety of fiber. And then we've started to improve our nutrition, right? And hope that most of us have started to incorporate more proteins in our diet, right? We're starting to remove a lot of the sugars. We may even notice that our cravings are starting to go away. I noticed that. That's something that I noticed for myself. But now we're going to start to add diverse probiotics back into our systems. But before we do that, we need to understand the benefits of probiotics. And so here's where we have our guest speaker, Dr. Lucas Grant, who is going to be talking more about microbiome diversity and increasing healthy bacteria. If you haven't heard from Dr. Lucas before, he is He earned his PhD in microbiology and food and nutrition sciences from the University of Queensland, Australia. And he focuses his research on the gut microbiome, functional foods, and the relationships between phytonutrients and human health. So I'm going to invite him to start his talk on bacterial microbiome diversity.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you Kieran for the great introduction. Today I'm going to talk about probiotics and how they relate to the microbiome. So remember last time we talked about what's the beneficial and important aspects of the microbiome. So today I'm really going to talk about how probiotics fit in with a healthy microbiome to really support our overall beneficial health, our gut health, our metabolic health, and of course our immune health. Really important at this time. So just to recap some of the importance of the microbiome, you may not know that our body is actually made up of approximately 1 trillion cells, and there's almost another trillion bacterial cells that live on and within us. And these are really important for our health and well-being. So they're very important in breaking down a lot of this fibrous material that we cannot ourselves break down. They support our immune system and our metabolic system. And there's actually this huge community of trillions of these organisms within us. And the gut microbiome is really the most important aspect of all of the microbiomes that have been really discovered so far. Another really important one that we see here is the skin microbiome. That's really important in regulating and helping maintain that skin barrier and functional correctness. So we also talked about last time, what is a healthy microbiome made up of? And it's this healthy, diverse community. So there are thousands of different bacteria in this, and they all have important roles. And you can think of it as similar to our own communities that we live in. We have very specific roles in our community. We have such as policemen and teachers, but we can't all have those roles. And it's these individual roles that really give us that benefit and that specific targeted effectiveness. So these core functions of this beneficial bacteria is what really makes a healthy microbiome. And we don't know what every single bacteria is doing within our gut, but the associations we've found is that a more diverse community actually increases its capacity to benefit you. So that is why diversity is such an important aspect of a healthy microbiome. And we can think about this in an analogy about when a healthy community fails. So when one of those specific roles has disappeared. So think about like when a strike happens and there's a garbage strike, for example, that I'm showing in this image. There's a breakdown in this community, and it's building up with all of this garbage. No one's taking it away. It's not being cleared. And you can think of it in the same way. If you're missing specific important bacterial groups in your gut, you can actually end up having a lot of issues and pro-inflammatory responses, inflammation. You might feel tired and lethargic, and the gut is really unstable. And we call this dysbiosis. And it's where there's a failure in the community that's needed to really regulate a healthy gut. So why are we seeing a decline in diversity in the microbiome in modern times? Well, there's actually a range of factors that actually affect the bacteria that live in your gut, such as processed foods, prescription drugs, especially antibiotics. Now, antibiotics, of course, are hugely important in the medical field, but they can do a lot of damage to your gut microbiome. And this is because many antibiotics are very non-specific. So in the way that they remove pathogens, they also target possibly beneficial bacteria and really affecting their numbers. Some people think of it much like a nuclear bomb in the gut, and it's just wiping out everything that's there. But I don't think it is as harsh as that. It's more, to me, like an analogy to think about taking some of these things as a tsunami coming through. And so there's a lot of damage and there's a lot of death of different members, but there's still parts of the community that remain. But this constant barrage of this modern lifestyle, cleaning products as well, over processed foods and junk foods, it's really driving the diversity of the microbiome down. And we see this with studies where we see an increase in diversity with really beneficial foods, that fibrous material, prebiotic fibers, And this actually is related to more beneficial microbiome. And this is seen with studies that show the difference between our modern city environments, so the microbiome of people living in these cities, compared to a rural environment where the diversity of the microbiome is much higher. And it's really giving a fantastic metabolic health boost. And part of these differences that we've seen also is there's a relationship between a microbiome that is low in diversity and obesity, and we see the same correlation with an increased diversity of the microbiome and a more metabolically healthy, active person. So out of all of the varying external factors that can affect the microbiome, diet can actually be considered one of the most important. And this is a really good factor to talk about, because the diet can be considered so important. You can think of the diet as maintenance. So the diet actually changes daily, and it's really this maintenance that really helps and support the microbiome and drives it to that its potential. So keeping it diverse with the food that we intake. So I like to think about it as the more diverse your diet, the more diverse your microbiome is going to be. And this is really important for your overall health and well-being. And I'm going to talk about how these interact between the microbiome and your health. So first I wanted to talk about the gastrointestinal tract itself. And this is really important to sort of describe why probiotics are so beneficial for you. So if you think about the gastrointestinal tract, we talked about this last week, it's actually a long tube between from end to end. And it's for the absorption and extraction of nutrients, and the removal of wastes are its primary targets. But if you think about internally of the tube, it's actually continuously moving through, and towards the side of the gut is actually moves less slowly, but there's this mucus layer that's really important for supporting that bacterial growth and our colonizing microbiome. So this is where I wanted to talk about two sort of different types of probiotics. Transient probiotics, these are like hitchhikers. So I mentioned that the tube, the food moves through the tube continuously, and probiotics that are continuously moving through, they may not colonize, but they can still have immense benefits for our health as they move through the gut. And these transient ones I consider as hitchhikers. They're having a ride through. And there's also colonizers, and these are bacteria that actually make a home within the gut. So they will colonize against that mucus lining of the gut cell wall. And this is really important for our health as well. But different probiotics will do this to varying effects. So some may be described as transient, but they actually might colonize for a short time and have a huge benefit for us. Now, thinking about the movement, you might think, well, why do we need probiotics if they're moving through the, being excreted from the gut continuously? Well, part of this reason I was talking about this is seeing a correlation and analogy as probiotics in nature. So if you think about these three species, so we've got a cow, a rabbit, and of course us as a human, a cow actually protects a closed system of probiotics within its gut. So it actually has to have that beneficial bacteria there all the time to break down grass. Now, grass is hugely difficult to break down, so it needs bacteria to break down those substances and extract all the nutrients for its growth. And this is actually where a lot of the microbiome studies started, was within cattle. They have this function, it's called the rumen, and this is where they keep all this bacteria to break down all this fibrous material, and it's really important in our health. Now, rabbits actually have a similar system. So they keep microbes in their gut to break down grass as well, but they actually eat other foodstuffs as well. But the bacteria in their gut is interesting, that it actually gets excreted. So, but for the rabbit to continuously have the microbes it needs, it actually re-ingests its excreted microbes. And this is actually a really interesting factor for the way that it regulates and keeps the beneficial bacteria that it needs within its gut. And of course, us as humans, we have this long tubular tract through our mouth from end to end. And as it moves through, of course, we don't bring anything back into our guts. Although there is fecal microbiome transplants is a big thing now. But The interesting thing, I wanted to show these three parallels is because the difference with humans is the changing of our environments and the foodstuffs that we eat. And this is like, why do we need probiotics? And that was really to show uh, the movement through the gut and the differences, because food stuff now is actually more shelf stable. And when I say that, it's heavily processed, it's high in preservatives, and this is actually changing the way we interact with microorganisms within our world. So in the past, we would have constantly picked up a lot of beneficial bacteria from our environment. So living in the environment, from the soils, on the foods that we eat, it would all be moved into our gut, and it would be actually really beneficial. So we would pick up a lot from the environment. But now with food being so shelf stable to feed this immense population that we currently have, there's a lot of processing, a lot of preservatives, and these are all antimicrobial, because we have to have that antimicrobial effect in our food to give it that longer shelf life. So it's a compromise between these two factors. We need to feed all these people and have this shelf-stable food, but we've lost a lot of that beneficial effect of the bacteria that was naturally surrounding us at all times. And this is why we see a huge difference between those big city microbiomes and those of rural counterparts. So here I wanted to talk about a lot of the benefits of probiotics. So probiotics can actually help really regulate that gut environment, and they can be anti-pathogenic. So with the beneficial probiotics actually growing, they prevent the growth of potentially harmful bacteria in the gut. And this is really important because it takes a burden off your immune system, and it actually helps with not just pathogenic bacteria, but controlling a lot of substances that are in our environment that are involved in the development of allergies. So that's actually how they help a lot with reducing the instances of allergies in people, as probiotics are really beneficial for that. They're actually a strong source of vitamins. So we talked about that a lot, the microbiome drugstore, and this beneficial bacteria can actually produce a lot of these vitamins that we require. And some of these compounds are also anti-inflammatory, so that compromise between absorbing food and keeping any kind of bad bacteria out is really important in regulating that immune system and having that anti-inflammatory response. So it's really about having the right amount of inflammation within the gut. And of course, there's a lot of an effect on our metabolic health and reducing the obesity. And this is because a lot of the energy that we use actually comes from the breakdown of really important prebiotic fibers within the gut. And these are some of the real benefits of probiotics. So I just wanted to talk a bit about how to look for a good probiotic. So it's important to have, when you talk about lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, these are actually a genus name. And so when you're looking for a good probiotic, you want to see that the species name is actually defined. So the species name is then acidophilus, so Lactobacillus acidophilus. This is actually giving it if you think about lactobacillus as being like a family, then acidophilus will be referring to the specific member within that group. And again, so here, acidophilus, plantarum, casei, longum, this has all been well defined in this blend of probiotics. You also want to look for the defined amount of bacteria in the probiotic. So this is really important because it can actually give you a base work for looking at the efficacy. So if you've seen some research or someone's told you about a good probiotic and you need this much, having the amount of bacteria well defined is really important to help guide you to the right probiotic. But of course, the number of bacteria that are in the probiotic isn't as important if it is not well protected. So for a probiotic to work and reach the gut, it actually has to pass through the stomach. And the stomach is very, very acidic. And so the probiotic needs some kind of protection to get through into the gastrointestinal and small intestine to really give you that benefit. So to survive the stomach, probiotic bacteria actually has a lot of mechanisms to protect itself from acidic environments. So you would think, oh, it's okay, it can actually get through. But the probiotics within that we use as supplements and that everyone uses as supplements, they're actually in a dormant phase. So they're ready to go on the shelf, but they won't sort of come alive, if you like, until they reach that the area of the gut that they're supposed to be. So for them to get through into the right area, they have to survive the stomach, and they need to have a protection and a protective layer. And this is really called what we call probiotic encapsulation. And the unique thing about Probionic Plus, it actually has a quadruple encapsulated layer. And these actually help protect it from that acidic environment. Is also against bile acids and protein degrading enzymes that are in our gut, so it can reach that right area and really give you that beneficial effect. So this is hugely important when looking for a good probiotic, is really having that protection so it gets to where it needs to be. And probiotics also help support a healthy microbiome by having specific functions within the gut. So these are some of the strains within the Unicity Probionic Plus. And this proprietary blend has been shown to have a beneficial effect on boosting the microbiome support. And it can do this in a range of ways. So a lot of these bacteria actually produce compounds and to prevent the growth of pathogens in the gut, which is really important for your immune health. They also help boost those beneficial metabolites that I talked about last time to break down that important prebiotic fiber in the gut. Some of these are really good in actually reducing that effect of potential allergens. So reducing the effect of allergies in the environment. This is really good for your overall health. And of course, such as Bifidobacterium lactis HN019, this one actually helps with keeping you regular and keeping that gut environment really good. Probiotics together actually help, they have a synergistic effect, and they really helping boost that gut environment in different ways. And I'm going to talk about some of those ways that probiotics can really boost the microbiome to help you. And some of these to varying effects. So we actually know from research that with age, Bifidobacterium actually declines. So it actually becomes more difficult for your gut to support a beneficial Bifidobacterium community. And this genus of bacteria is really important for your long-term health. So this combination of multiple strains of probiotics, which has also been shown that an increased number of strains is actually really beneficial for having a broad targeted effect for your gut and immune and metabolic health. So the combination of these strains together really boosts that probiotic product. So we talked about this a bit last week. How does the microbiome and hormones relate to the gut? And to the body and health in general. So when we talk about a relationship between two different types of, they often call it this axis. So we have the gut-brain axis, there's the gut-muscle axis, and here we have this estrogen gut microbiome axis. And I really wanted to talk about this because it's really important for regulating hormones in the body, and I wanted to really show how it was able to do that. So in the gut, the microbiome can actually help certain hormones actually become more available for the cells that require it. So the microbiome can actually have a form of estrogen that is joined to another compound, and while it's in this form, it's not available for cells to use, but the microbiome can actually help make it more available to the cells. And this actually can help with increasing the available estrogen in the body and reducing the amount reducing the symptoms of menopause, for example. And this is really good in regulating hormone responses, making these hormones more available to the cells that require them in the body. And this is really good also for the way that it regulates metabolism. For example, we talked a lot about this, about the diet changing the microbiome, and it produces these short chain fatty acids in these other components. And these can actually, a lot of these can be signaling mechanisms, or they're used for signaling, and they're also used for energy. And so some of these signalings actually triggers our body to produce hormones. And these are related to glucose metabolism, fat storage, feeding, satiety. So that's really that feeling of fullness. And that's really important, is that feeling of fullness, to really reduce that food intake and lower that weight gain. So the microbiome is heavily related to these hormone production. And this is really because of the production predominantly of these beneficial nutrients for our health, these short chain fatty acids. But the thing about these is they'll only come from the breakdown of really beneficial prebiotic fiber. So it's about putting in, getting out what you put in. So giving the microbiome the right prebiotics that it requires will actually support the growth of those beneficial members that create these nutrients that we need for regulating our hormone responses. But not all fiber is the same. And I really like to use this analogy where it's like comparing a Porsche to an old Corolla. They're both cars, but they're not doing the optimal job the same way. And this is how fiber really helps a healthy microbiome. But as I mentioned, it's really about those scientifically proven prebiotic fibers to influence the right growth of beneficial bacteria. And this can change the way that it regulates those hormones and those signals to our body to help us regulate and support our metabolic health and our immune health. So it's really about taking the right fiber. And I like this analogy that we talked about last week of birds flying in a V formation. Now, this is birds actually flying this way to actually optimize the energy utilization of the entire group. And this is really important for helping them use the available nutrients and energy as required. And it's really good because it shows how the synergistic effect between different members of this whole group. And I like to think about this in the same way as our microbiome, where each member is really giving a good support to the other. And it's about having the right members there all together. And this is one of the great features of the multi-strain Probionic Plus, giving you a synergistic benefit between each strain. And as I mentioned, it's to produce these bacterial nutrients, so the thousands of nutrient compounds that can be produced and have a real role in appetite regulation, gut motility, hormone, making those hormones really available to the body and helping that environment so that we're really well regulated and performing to our optimal. So it's that microbiome drugstore. I really like this, the relationship to health. So that within your gut, there's this huge drugstore of available compounds to really help you boost the way that your microbiome helps. But it's really about putting the right prebiotic fiber. So this ingestion of dietary fiber is then fermented by this bacteria with the production of these nutrients that really help regulate these metabolic and immune responses. But of course, it has to be the right type of prebiotic fiber, because it's very good to have on reading on the labels that it just says it contains dietary fiber, but without knowing the types and the real importance of what it's actually doing in the body, it's difficult to correlate that. So it's really about that. Not all dietary fibers are the same. And having this as part of your microbiome health goals, so including a healthy, diverse diet. Remember, I mentioned a more diverse diet going in actually increases the diversity of your microbiome itself. Regular exercise and adequate sleep, combined with those prebiotic fibers that are really supportive, and probiotics as well. As I mentioned, that our environment has really changed. So a lot of the probiotics that were available to us in our natural environment have really decreased. We're not living in rural environments anymore. We're in heavily polluted cities with decreased fresh foods and increased processed foods and increased antimicrobials all around us. So it's really important to keep that delivery of important probiotics. And as we know, probiotics actually decrease with age. So it's really important about keeping those probiotic levels at a good maintenance. So it's all about maintenance of the gut, and for maintenance of the gut and maintenance for you. So it's really quid pro quo, if you like. What you put in is what you're going to get out, a favor for a favor. So you're actually giving the microbiome a home to live and providing it with the food it requires. And in return, it is providing you with so many beneficial nutrients that you need to achieve optimal health and vitality. And this in turn gives you a healthy microbiome. So thank you for listening to my talk. And I hope if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
If anyone has any questions, you can just type them in the chat box or just let me know and I can unmute you. So when doing a cleanse, when is it good to add probiotic?
When doing the cleanse, I would say at the end of the cleanse, when you've finished the cleanse program, because part of the cleanse is sort of giving you that baseline to start building that healthy microbiome. And some of the ingredients in the cleanse is actually increasing the transit time and sort of removing a lot of potentially pathogenic bacteria. And having that environment, it might be more difficult for probiotics. So it's probably better to, once you've got that baseline, then start introducing probiotics and the really beneficial prebiotic fiber as well.
Nice. And then another question we have is, how many billion CFU do we need?
So I mentioned about the encapsulation. So it's really important to see it so you can, it gives you like if you've seen a study, then you can really link that to what you've seen, and you can say, oh, I'm taking that much as well. But without that protective encapsulation, what it says on the box might not actually be what it gets into the gut, because of that harsh stomach environment. And if it's not protected on the shelf, the numbers can actually decrease with time. And then when they ingest it and there's that real harsh environment, there's a huge loss of bacterial numbers. So it's actually a sort of a two-factor. You really need that protective coating to get it to where it needs to be. But in terms of overall numbers, it's not just, it's not really about looking for the most number of bacterial cells in the product itself.
Awesome. And is there a time of day where it's best to take probiotics? Is it better before food, between meals? When is the best time?
So with the Probionic Plus, it has that really good encapsulation, so that quadruple protective layer. I would, so probiotics can be really helpful if you taking before food or with food to really help it move through into the gastrointestinal tract. But because there's that real strong protective layer on this particular product, it isn't as important to take it with food to give it that extra protective benefit. So when you have a big meal, the acidity in your stomach can actually decrease slightly as opposed to an empty stomach. So this is why a lot of medications also sometimes say take with food to help it get to where it needs to be. So it's a similar thing with probiotics. But in terms of that real protective layer and that patented quadruple protection, it's the time of intake with food isn't as important.
We have another question here where should we avoid dairy when taking probiotics?
No, there's no, unless you're like intolerant to dairy, there's no reason to avoid dairy with probiotics. And probiotics can actually be helpful as well. There's a lot of research showing that if you have if you have dairy and you do have a slight upset from the extra lactose in the product, a lot of probiotics can actually decrease that lactose, and they're really helpful for reducing some of that bloating that you get from dairy products. So dairy and probiotics is fine together.
Okay, great. And I've also heard that certain medications can mess up your gut microbiome. So should we be taking probiotics with certain medications like painkillers, for example?
You mean at the same time or while?
During the course of let's say, because I was on, Tylenol and Advil last year. And I'm just thinking now, maybe I should have been taking probiotics at the same time. It could have been more helpful for me to prevent that bloating that I experienced and those cravings that I experienced after.
Yeah, so it would be fine to complement your medication with probiotics, and it might be helpful to sort of give you that extra protection. So a lot of probiotic benefits are actually helping to keep potentially pathogenic or bad organisms out of the gut, or stopping them from having any sort of problems with yourself. So if you have probiotics at the same time, you'll be getting that added benefit of protection that the medication that you're taking might have an effect on your gut microbiome. So the probiotics might lower this possibility of any adverse reactions to that.
And so another person asked, do antibiotic drugs kill probiotics?
And so a lot of antibiotics, as I mentioned, they're called broad spectrum, which means they're not targeted. They can interfere with a lot of different bacteria, and probiotics can actually be affected by antibiotics as well. But that's why it's quite good to start taking probiotics after you finish an antibiotics course, to really start replenishing those levels that you've wiped out. So I was talking about when you take an antibiotic in the gut, it's sort of like a tsunami coming through. It's wiping out a lot of members, and really lowering the diversity and the beneficial effects of these bacteria in the gut. But the thing about antibiotics, they can actually change sort of the composition of the gut microbiome. So when you wiped out a few members, other members might start growing and taking their place, and this will change the composition. So it's really good. Probiotics can be really helpful in supporting that return to a stable microbiome.
Awesome. And another question was, we have lots of questions today for you, by the way, so you have our hands full. Any relation between taking probiotic and hormonal imbalances like PCOS or Candida or vaginal bacteria?
So there's a lot of probiotics, and some of the strains actually in Probionic Plus are actually really good at supporting that, so the vaginal environment to really have a healthy vaginal microbiome. So that we talked about, there's the gut microbiome and the skin microbiome, but there's actually a microbiome of the vagina as well. And it's part of the real beauty of the probiotics is that they can affect the pH, and this actually helps keep it in high maintenance, if you like. So preventing that growth of candida or any other sort of pathogenic, potentially pathogenic organisms. So it's in the same way it sort of maintains the home of the gut, it helps maintain that area as well. So, and part of it can actually, a lot of these probiotics release antimicrobial proteins, so against, or antifungal as well, and they'll actually reduce the environment, make it a more hostile environment for potentially pathogenic organisms. And a lot of that changes the pH change, that it helps keep at an optimal.
Awesome, great. We also have another question about how does Unicity's Probiotic Plus compare to some of the probiotics that we find in most health food stores, or the ones that have to be stored in a fridge?
So Unicity's Probiotic Plus is the encapsulation is really important, that 4 layers of protection for the bacteria that's there. So a lot of probiotics that you find, they might not actually have a really good protective layer to protect the bacteria going into the gut. So even though they're not going to survive through the stomach, they're going to be destroyed, or they're not even shelf stable on the shelf itself. In terms of fridge versus shelf products, the way that the probiotics actually made dormant now, they don't require refrigeration. So they're actually, if you like, they're sort of alive, but you can think of them as almost asleep. So when they get to the environment, they actually wake up, and they actually start giving you those beneficial effects. So in terms of fridge versus shelf, there's no difference to the efficacy, but a lot of these products, what they claim on the box is contained there isn't actually in the final product. And some tests have looked at different probiotics and matching up the numbers that they report and the effect in the gut, and it doesn't correlate. And this is really because of that lack of any sort of protection for the probiotic to reach where it's getting to. Because if you think about it, if they're asleep or dormant and they're thrown into this harsh acidic environment, they're not going to be able to protect themselves. They're just going to be destroyed.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. We're going to keep moving, and I think that some of these questions that we have left over will get answered during the last portion of our talk. And I want to make sure that we have time to hear from someone who's been going through the cleanse so far and hear from their experience and how it's helped them in the few days that we've just started. So thank you again, Dr. Lucas, for taking your time out and sharing that presentation. It was very valuable, very useful. And we're looking forward to adding these probiotics towards the end of our cleanse to help increase that microbiome diversity and improve our gut health.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Dr. Lucas talked about, why we need probiotics. And, among these 4 factors of like detoxification, helping with the waste removal, food digestion, helping to break down some of those foods, and, production of vitamins and protecting ourselves against these harmful pathogens, we have to remember that there are certain things, certain factors that we need to consider when looking at different types of probiotics. And, I think Dr. Lucas really emphasized that bacterial coating matters. Not all these bacteria can survive the journey to the intestinal tract. Even if a probiotic says it has 10 billion CFUs, that doesn't necessarily mean that all 10 billion are going to arrive safely there. And so that coating matters. Another thing that matters that Dr. Lucas mentioned was that shelf stability matters. If some of these, probiotics that you may see on the shelf, they may already be dead by the time that you get to ingest them. So they need to be live. They need to be in that dormant state. And many probiotics, even though they are in this dormant state, they're also acidic, right? And some of these probiotics, these strains that you'll find that are commonly used, are acidic. And like Dr. Lucas mentioned, they can survive the intestinal tract, and that's why these are most commonly used. But I mean, if you're going to be purchasing a probiotic, you want to be using something that is not something that you can get in your everyday foods. It's something that you want to be able to get consistently and make sure that it's able to survive that intestinal tract. And again, it's not just one strain that we're looking at. We want to make sure that the probiotics that you do choose to use have that diversity, have multiple strains, because one strain may not be enough to overthrow whatever bacteria is currently living in your gut, right? And so, what's already living in your gut will determine bacterial survival. And so if you're introducing these multiple strains, they're going to be able to overpower and kind of be able to populate that intestinal lining. And so that's why I think doing the cleanse first has set us up to have that greater chance of survival. We're able to, we started with the clean slate. And so we're going to have increased survival. We're going to have increased effectiveness, especially since we're going to start to incorporate more probiotics into our diets. And the probiotic that we are going to be using is Probionic Plus. And this is live, healthy bacteria to help enhance bacterial diversity and help build balance of these bacterial populations in the digestive tract. And the reason why it really stands out is that it's listed in the PDR. And the PDR is basically a trusted resource for medical professionals and health professionals to look for innovative health products that have high standard and actually they have high quality, and these claims that are stated on these products are actually do what they say they're going to do, and they're pharmaceutical grade. So with Probionic Plus, you're getting a pharmaceutical grade probiotic. And so Probionic Plus, like Dr. Lucas mentioned, there's 11 different strains of these healthy bacteria, but this is also a very unique blend. If you try to find this blend, it's very difficult to find because usually these bacterial species are not found together. You're going to find like maybe more acidophilus, right? Lactobacillus acidophilus is one of the most commonly used, but it may not be in combination with all these other bacterial strains, and they all work together synergistically to help each other populate the digestive tract. And so when we're looking at a probiotic or improving our microbiome diversity, we want to take more of a targeted approach, not necessarily a shotgun approach. While you're more than welcome to do that with all these different varieties of probiotics, I feel like the most efficient way to do it, in my opinion, at least for myself, time-wise and with busy lifestyles, it's easiest to incorporate a targeted approach. We want to ensure that these bacterial strains that we're incorporating are actually colonizing and living in our intestinal lining. And so that's the difference between taking something like Probionic Plus versus like incorporating more fermented foods in your diet. While fermented foods are really helpful and can help increase your bacterial diversity, you're kind of relying on a shotgun approach here, because you have no idea what the strains of bacteria are in these fermented foods. It's very difficult. You don't know the quality of those strains. Some of these strains that are in these fermented foods may not be able to even survive the digestional stomach acid to get to the digestional tract. And you also may need to eat a lot of variety. And getting that variety consistently, I mean, I can say for myself, when it comes to health, you want to keep things super simple, right? And so incorporating one probiotic sachet a day is simple. I'm feeling confident that I have the strains that increase that survivability in my digestive lining. And you have that increased shelf life. It actually lasts up to 2 years on a shelf, and it's scientifically designed to attach to that gut lining. You have that, that scientific proof that it will survive. So here's where attachment matters, right? This patented quadruple coated probiotic that we find in Probionic Plus, it is specifically designed to help attach to that gut lining. And so they survive 4 to 5 times longer to populate the intestinal tract than generic probiotics. And it has an effective dose, right? Dr. Lucas talked about effectiveness. It's not just the number, it's how many are actually effectively getting into the lining. And it also, Probionic Plus has these bacterial strains to help improve the short chain fatty acids, right? But these bacterial species need this to signal to the gut lining to help that boost that immune system. And it's used as that energy source, and it helps with that inflammation as well. And if you look at this picture on the left, you'll see the Great Wall of China. Basically, Probionic Plus is acting like a security wall. It's in reinforcing that gut lining, making sure that it's impenetrable. Only certain molecules can cross or not cross. It's like the bouncer. It's going to allow things in and out, but in a very controlled manner. And there's also bacterial strains that help absorb our nutrients. And like Dr. Lucas emphasized, it helps boost immune health. And as you remember, 70% of our immune system is in the gut. It's really important to incorporate healthy bacteria to help boost this immune health. And it also contains beneficial strains to help lower inflammation. Now, we want certain levels of inflammation in our body. Right, we want little campfires, right? But if we start to develop like forest fire level of inflammation, we want to be able to lower that. And so Probiotic Plus has these bacterial strains to help lower inflammation. And it also helps to improve metabolism. So what part of our cleanse system is to incorporate the Probionic Plus. Now, retail wise, if you go onto the Unicity website, it's $49 plus shipping and tax. But with all of us, we all have an account with Unicity, a member account, which allows us access to that wholesale pricing. So we save a good $12 on this product, and we get $12, and it's only $12 shipping because it is coming from the US. But a good thing about this is that you can purchase up to 3 probiotics and still pay the only $12 flat rate shipping. And so I'm just going to quickly show you guys how you can purchase. We're just going to log in. So you can log in using your email and the password provided when you originally signed up for your account. And you want to click on this little icon right here. It says use NFR checkout, and make sure that your country is set to Canada. You're going to click on that. And then you're going to scroll all the way. You're going to click on all products and scroll down till we find the Probiotic Plus. There we go. And we're going to add that to our cart. Now, so I'm going to add 3. just so I could show you guys that you have, and yeah, there you go. It's $12 flat rate shipping. Even if you change the quantity to 2 or 1, it is still $12 shipping. Anything more than 3, you'll have to pay additional shipping costs. But this is honestly a deal, guys. If we're going to be taking in a probiotic, incorporating a probiotic, you want something that actually does what it says it's going to do. And I think that's very, very important, especially moving forward, because we know that consistency is key. Achieving a healthy microbiome isn't just a 30-day process. It is something that is a long term, and it takes that commitment. You know, it can take up to 60 days or 6 months for us to notice changes in our gut health. And so long term is key. And so at this point, I'm actually want to invite someone to talk about their experience so far on the cleanse. Stop sharing my screen for a second. I know we have Priyanka, who's experienced really interesting, she's had a really interesting experience so far on the cleanse, and I just wanted to invite her to share her story so far. So Priyanka, could you just tell us why you started to do the cleanse, why you wanted to do the cleanse, and what it's done for you so far?
Definitely. So hi everyone. So I actually have been I've been taking Unicity products prior to the cleanse, and I guess one of the reasons why I had decided to just kind of start it was primarily because I was experiencing a lot of bloating and inconsistent, like, I guess if you want to call it waste removal, in a sense. And I found I was just like, you know what, with everything that's going on, I think it'd be helpful to have a supplement to aid in whatever digestive issues I may have that may be happening as a result of lack of nutrients in my diet, because I am vegetarian, and a lot of the foods that we do eat tend to be carb heavy. And when you eat foods that are carb heavy, the yeast sticks to your stomach, and it's not fibrous is essentially it. And I know from general knowledge that fiber is key to help with the removal process. So I thought, you know what, let's try this out and see how it goes. And it's been about, as I think as it has been for everyone, 10 days. And one thing I noticed, like the first day, I admittedly I didn't enjoy the process of taking the live fiber. I personally did throw it up the first day just because I did not like the taste. I'm not a fan of banana, but I think Karen kind of like coached me through that and was like, you know what, take it in addition with your balance, the orange, if it's the flavor that's bothering you, that's a separate issue than the actual product itself, which was exactly what happened. So by day 2, I was kind of okay with like taking the live fiber and also taking the Paraway Plus. And last week in particular for me was super super stressful in the sense that I had a lot of work going on, and I was kind of thinking about what I was eating. But on a normal week like what was last week, with what I was eating, I usually do have issues with going to the bathroom. And I personally found that I wasn't feeling bloated, I wasn't extremely tired, and I wasn't I guess you would say, like, I wasn't experiencing any symptoms that I normally would. And I don't know, like, for certain that it is the products that I'm taking that are helping, but I can definitely say that it's provided some sort of assistance. Like, even yesterday on Sundays, I enjoy eating pizza, for example. And I think I definitely had a lot less than normal just because I didn't feel the need to eat more than eat as much as I usually do. But primarily this morning, I didn't have any issues with the feelings in my stomach. I wasn't bloated. I wasn't I wasn't feeling the aftermaths of eating something like that. And it was interesting because it kind of boiled down to, I do think this kind of cleanse in the intestines is kind of happening, and the supplements are assisting in kind of providing the nutrients that the food that I may have day to day doesn't have. And you hear a lot about, these are fibrous foods, but I can't say that the vegetables or the regular food that I have eaten have ever given me the same type of feeling and type of, I guess, results, in the sense of feeling better the way it has been the last 7 days. And that's obviously kind of put me in a place where I'm kind of excited to see like what's to come in the next 20, like where can this take me? And yeah.
That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Branka. I think a lot of us can relate, especially with like the cravings, like noticing that, you know, you're not really eating as much of these certain foods that you love. Like I'm a big pizza fan too. And yeah, for sure. If like I was probably to eat a pizza now, like I would probably not be able to finish it like I normally would be able to, right? And I really like that you emphasized that you didn't like the taste of live fiber. I mean, for one, did not like the taste of live fiber at all either. And I still don't like it. I just can't, but I understand the benefits. And I think you're beginning to learn those benefits as well, and seeing how it can really help aid in your digestive system. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I just wanted to emphasize, like, moving forward, everyone, you know, we really don't want to be relying so much on willpower, right? Willpower is exhaustible. Willpower is something that, you know, long term is not going to give us those results that we want, right? Like we have certain goals in our life that we want to achieve, but if we're relying so much on willpower and not focusing on building those habits, have a much better time of, you know, reaching our goals. And I know some of you had that question about, okay, what kind of fibers should we be using and what varieties of fibers should we be using? And I think that's where we're going to really talk about it in our last call, right? Moving forward, how do we maintain a healthy microbiome? You know, do we continue on live fiber, or is there an alternative that I can use? And we can talk about, you know, balance, something that I've been using for the last 7 years that can really help with adding those prebiotic fibers if you have trouble with the taste of live fiber, and continuing forward what we can do to help maintain that healthy microbiome. And also talk more about some of the victories that we've been going through, you know, what challenges that we've been able to overcome when it comes to cravings, when it comes to, you know, whether or not we've been binging or not at night. I know some of you had that issue. And so I just want to say thank you so much for coming tonight and spending some time with us and learning from Dr. Lucas Grant, who's really given us such valuable information. So thank you again. And I know we went a little bit over time, so I appreciate your patience. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of your results in the coming weeks. All right, thank you guys. Have an amazing night.
Thank
Bye.
you.